Today we ask, is democracy under threat here in Ireland? Or is Ireland even a democracy at all? So there's a couple of things at play here that I want to just kick off with, and the first is that I have said it before and I will continue to say it. Ireland is essentially a one-party state. All the main actors are essentially different shades of the same colour, and that colour is beige. Now, the other thing I want to say is that the mainstream media in Ireland is completely dysfunctional. It is not fit for purpose. This idea of the mainstream media being the fourth estate, holding truth to power, speaking truth to power, I should say, and holding the powers that be to account on behalf of the likes of me and probably you, the ordinary citizen. That doesn't happen anymore. The mainstream media, for the past number of years, has been hand in glove with the government of the day, with the political class, with the political elites. And they get in turn various trinkets and goodies from governments. One of the most recent ones being in the latest budget, where the government decided to do away with VAT, that's value added tax, on the sales of newspapers, etc. Another little quid pro quo, one could say, for just not rocking the boat too much. Of course, they're allowed to do little bits of poking here and there, but nothing that the government doesn't want. Now, where am I going with all this spiel? I'll tell you where I'm going. The theme that I've said in the introduction is that the democracy angle as regards the Republic of Ireland in present day. A little piece came into my purview, came to my notice, and I thought, oh, that's odd. I didn't hear that splashed all over the media, all over the news, and the reason was that it wasn't splashed all over the media and all over the news. But I think it's important, and I think it's quite critical for the political future of Ireland, for the future of democracy in Ireland. And you'll see where I'm going with this now, because there's only a few, very few actual, to my mind, outlets that are outside the bubble, that are outside the captured media class. And one of those, to mind, comes the Village magazine, and it's again, they're not afraid to speak truth to power and call out things that they see are wrong. Another is Gript.ie, another great outlet, some great journalism going on there. Those two outlets are on different sides of the political arena, if you like, but both prepared to dig in a real way to what's going on, to try and get to the root of issues, which simply doesn't happen in mainstream. There are areas that they just can't or won't touch. So we're going to hop on over to Gript.ie to see what's going on with this latest story. This is a piece from Matt Tracy, Dr. Matt Tracy here, and it's a thing that I saw and I thought, oh, okay, there's another pillar that holds up the supposed democracy and the democratic will of the people. Another pillar knocked out, and it's the slow disintegration of political discourse and the political arena, in terms of how the ordinary person can access it, can engage with it in a meaningful way. So has a new law quietly, this is Dr. Matt Tracy, has a new law quietly made it harder to register a new political party? One of the final pieces of legislation to be passed into law by the Oireachtas, that's the Parliament for you non-Gaelic speakers out there, by the Oireachtas prior to their summer recess, was the Electoral Reform Act 2022. It attracted little attention, mainly for the reason that it was supported with some minor exceptions, by all of the parties. A not unusual scenario, despite their constant squabbling over minutiae, over social welfare increases and such like. So they're always, that's what I'm saying. They're all different shades of beige. They essentially agree on all the main things, and they just play out this political theatre, and it is political theatre. Essentially, they're only talking about the frills around the edges, the bits and pieces around the edges that really don't make a whole lot of difference. There's going to be no change, because there can't be any change, because they all pretty much agree on the same things. Now, okay, there's a couple of paragraphs there. I'm not going to go into all that. I want to get to the meat and potatoes of this. Now, perhaps this Dr. Matt Tracy goes on, perhaps the most interesting part of the bill, this is the last bill they passed before they went on their 10-month holiday or whatever they get. It's ridiculous how little they work, actually, for the money they get, and they're always giving themselves pay rises, so whatever they're getting today, they're probably getting more next week. Perhaps the most interesting part of the bill, now enacted, so it's in, are the changes that were made to the criteria for registering a new political party for the purposes of contesting future elections. Not surprisingly, not one opposition TD, not one, even referred to this, nor sought to amend it by amendment. So, essentially, no TD, sitting member of Parliament, questioned it or tried to amend it or raised any problem with it. So what is this new law that is now enacted? It's in there now. It's been signed off, and they were all quite happy with it. You see what I mean about being a uni-party, a one-party state? They were all good with this. Section 45B, paragraph 2, I assume, now appears to require that any new party have not only at least 300 recorded members. Alright, fair enough, you know. I suppose you can't have every head the ball in a back shed somewhere just deciding he's going to be a party. Well, I suppose he can, but he can't do it officially. So I get that. You kind of have to have maybe at least a bit of support for whatever your manifesto is. So in addition to not only 300 recorded members, but must also, if it intends to contest seats in the Dáil or European Parliament, have at least one member who is a current sitting TD, Member of Parliament, or a member of the European Parliament. In the case of a party that not only intends to contest local elections, it must, in line with section 45B/3, have at least 3 members who are currently elected councillors. They're currently in the system. Alright? The 2001 Act, which the 2022 Act supersedes, allowed for the membership requirement, or that a party already have a TD. The current Act appears to remove that option. So, from my reading here, the previous Act, you could have 300 people who kind of thought you were great and your ideas were fabulous and should be running the country. 300 random souls, or perhaps one TD, one member of Parliament. So essentially a member of Parliament who was there already could have said, listen, this is all a load of bull. Yous are all mad and I'm the only sane one here, so I'm just going to go off and start my own party. Okay, fair enough. I mean, you're elected, I suppose you can do that. Now, that's all scrubbed with this new thing. 2 things, Dr. Tracy goes on with, 2 things might be said about this. Firstly, the fact that none of the parties currently registered objected to this for obvious reasons. Well, they're pulling up the drawbridge. That's it. We're in. We don't want anybody else getting in, so we're going to pull up the drawbridge behind us. It not only protects their flanks from possible competition from any new political movements that might arise, but arguably raises the bar on any future schisms within the parties currently represented in Leinster House, that's the Parliament, and on local authorities. You see what they're doing here? They're really making it way harder for any splinter groups, any kind of hotheads who are already elected, say, for the main parties, Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, or the Greens, or whoever, that they can go off paddling their own canoe and essentially set up their own shop, which has happened and is happening in parliaments all over the world. I mean, you get a group of a party that they're not happy with the way things going, or they think the leader is a jackass, and then they go off and they do their own thing. It has ever been thus, but now in Ireland it's getting a lot harder for that to happen, if it can happen at all. You see, they're all feeding at the trough, and they want to just keep the trough for themselves. They don't want any upstarts getting ideas about themselves. Let's read on. The second point also relates to the possibility of new societal movements arising which do not have current electoral representation. Ireland thus far has not experienced what has been a common electoral phenomenon across the democratic country since 2000. But given that this country is now experiencing many of the pressures which have contributed to the rise of, quote, populism, which is just a fancy term to demonise things that are maybe popular with the public. Can't have that. Populism overseas, that cannot be guaranteed to always be the case. The panic that arose around a substantial vote won by, quote, outsider Peter Casey in the last presidential election is indicative of the nightmare that haunts all of the establishment parties, from Fine Gael to Sinn Féin. Peter Casey, if you don't know who he is, he's a businessman, I believe, a successful businessman. I think he's resident in the States, but he ran for the presidential election. I think it's fairly easy to get on the ticket there if you want to have a go at that. Yeah, why not? I think it costs a few bob, and you probably have to get a few people to sign. So I think you can need some county councillors or something to, give you the nod, give you their thumbs up and sign you on, and you're good to go then. So Peter Casey basically was an outsider. He was saying all kinds of stuff that was going a bit against the grain, at least against the uni parties, the uni party state that we have. He was saying stuff that for some reason was resonating with the public. I won't go into it now, you can look it up if you want. And out of nowhere, he suddenly got a big wave of support. Now, he didn't win, he came second, I believe, but he was basically throwing all kinds of rocks into the pond, and he was saying things that the government was absolutely horrified by, but the public liked. And that scared the living daylights out of them, because God knows we can't have people saying stuff like that and people actually liking it, which is what happened. Now, he did have a good run. He wasn't really up to scratch. He just couldn't get it over the line. I mean, yeah, he kind of got a ball rolling, but he couldn't score the goal. He just wasn't up to the task. But it did send a bit of a shockwave round political circles, government circles especially, that Jesus, we can't have a lad like this or a girl like this popping up from nowhere, getting a grassroots movement going, and suddenly getting a heap of support by speaking about things and by voicing opinions that the public actually agree with. We need to keep it all contained and between the ditches, so that no outsiders can infiltrate, can get into the system and start making waves. This is what I believe is at the root of all this. Let's read on anyway, which raises the issue. This is back to Matt Tracy, which raises the issue as to whether that part of the new electoral legislation is designed to preempt or make more difficult such a development. Well, I think it is. What else could it be? Lest anyone think that it is myself just rambling, ask yourself how this legislation might have affected some of those new European parties of both left and right, had such legislation been in place. Indeed, had such legislation been in place for the 1997 general election of the Irish Republic, And had Sinn Féin not been previously registered as a political party, which it had not been up to the late 80s, it would not have been in a position to elect its first TD on the back of the IRA ceasefire. Or at least Caoimhín Ó Caolan could not have been permitted to put the party name on the ballot sheet. See, this is something people forget. Like, until relatively recently, at least relatively recently in my lifetime, Sinn Féin was a non-entity. Sinn Féin was fringe. They were the outside of the outside of the outside. Now, they always had a support base, but they were seen as the radical people. They were seen as they were tied up with the whole northern business and all the unpleasantness there. They were very much tied to that and inextricably tied to that. So they could never really rise above a certain level of support in the Republic. Now, once the whole ceasefire came in, the Good Friday Agreement and all that, they shifted, they transitioned, and they got their first MP, or TD, which is MP for us, Member of Parliament, in Caoimhín Ó Caolan. Now, by these current rules, now Sinn Féin, as you know, they're going to be in the next government. There's no question. Their turn is coming up. They have transitioned, and it will be fully complete in the next election, when they will, in coalition with whoever they pick up, they'll get into bed with someone. But they, mark my words, they will be in the next government. They will be the main party. People think they're an alternative. They're not really. By these rules, Sinn Féin couldn't have gotten anywhere. They couldn't have gotten on the ballot by these rules. So you can see, pulling the drawbridge up behind you is what's going on here. The Sweden Democrats, let's read on. So the Sweden Democrats, now the second largest party in Sweden, would not have been permitted to register prior to winning their 20 seats, from having previously had none in 2010. Likewise, Vox in Spain, who went from no seats to 24 between 2016 and 2019 general elections. And similarly with the farmer citizen movement, which is now polling around 12% in Dutch opinion polls, would not have been able to contest the 21 elections, in which it returned its currently sole representative and party leader, Christine van der Plas. So, with the new Irish electoral law, there is a considerable electoral barrier to a new popular political movement that might perhaps reflect some of the seismic undercurrents so far clearly only manifested as ripples on the surface of a placid pool of consensus in Kildare Street. That's where the Parliament is. Although perhaps, given the presence of a small number of TDs and senators outside of that self-referential circle, and the obvious disquiet among elected and other members of the three largest parties over where that are headed, collectively perhaps the requirement for having already at least one elected representative might not prove such an impediment after all. Now, so you see where the problem is here. The current political class, they're looking at various movements across Europe, and Europe is coming under pressure from various different sides. You have the immigration problem, you've got big inflation going on, you have the whole situation in Ukraine. There's a lot of stresses and problems, pressures coming into the system, and the current political class, the current political elites have decided, look, we don't want anybody rocking the boat. We don't want any upstarts getting a popular movement, saying things we don't like, because they all agree on the main issues. All the main parties in Ireland, if you pick certain key big topics, EU membership, immigration, the hot button topic, they all agree. Abortion, all this, the new progressive stuff. Essentially, Ireland is a progressive haven. If you're in any way of a conservative mind, you've got nobody. You've got a couple of random independents. but you've got nobody who represents you in Parliament, and that's the way they like it, and that's the way they want to keep it. So we can't have any popular grassroots movement coming up from the grassroots. It's now got no mechanism to contest an election unless you can convince a sitting member of Parliament or some, members of councils, county councils, or other elected officials. Unless you can get them on board, you can't even get in the door now. Now, hop on over to my old favourite, the Twitter sphere. This is from Paddy McKenna. Good man, Paddy. Alright, what's Paddy saying here? Another government-led attack on democracy in Ireland. A piece of legislation passed quietly before recess will mean that a new political party cannot be registered unless it already has a sitting TD or MEP, and that's absolutely true. In this thread, this is politicians protecting their own turf, says Paddy. They don't want any new citizen-led groups registering as a political party and challenging for what they consider their seats in the next general election. Not one TD challenged this attack on the democratic process, and that should tell you all you need to know about politics in Ireland. Deirdre Ward says, sneakily done. That's a very sneakily done with a red face, an angry emoji there. Yeah, I think it was sneakily done too, Deirdre. And you didn't hear anything about it either, did you? Because the mainstream media's asleep. They're asleep because they're being paid to be asleep. Philip Morell, that is not only outrageous, but an attempt to stifle and wipe out any new political movement. We no longer live in a democratic country, says Philip Morell. I tend to agree with you, Philip. It's very much a closed shop. It's a one-party state at this stage. I'm sorry. They allow a few random independents to kind of, howl at the moon and speak sense sometimes, but they're really no threat to them, and they're going to be less of a threat now after this. We need to part from the EU, says Philip. 5k. I don't know who 5k is. There's the act there. Ozymandias says this is obviously illegal. They're hoping nobody will challenge it. Well, I hope somebody does challenge it, to be honest. I hope somebody does. No guarantee that they will. It'll probably cost you 10 billion euros to mount a challenge, but maybe. I hope somebody does. We're slowly moving towards a communist state, says Big Belly. Big Belly 2. Alright, fair enough. Yeah, Weight Watchers Anonymous there. Time for revolution, says Outlaw. Well, he's an outlaw. I suppose he would call for that. There's the act again. Controlling the opposition, the cornerstone of any nutritious democracy, says Dare I Err. Alright, yeah, okay. This cannot be true, Marek T. Kuntz says. Well, it actually is. If you've read the whole act there, it actually is true, completely true. Stephen, I'm not sure, but really waiting for Ukrainian Poles to put forward their own candidates. The next government will be Sinn Féin Green, so a completely different dictatorship, even more cruel. Okay, so he's not seeing a whole lot of hope there. Anyway, look, you get the picture. This is an attack on what's left of our democracy, and I say what's left of it because it's shrinking. If it hasn't shrunk and shriveled to the size of a pea, it's certainly on the way there. It's shriveling up, it's dying before our eyes. They're all the same. They're all on the key issues, on the main issues, on the hot button issues that everybody has on their minds. If you're looking for anybody who does not go with the current groupthink, which is all the main parties, if you're outside that bubble, you've got nobody. Nobody represents you in Parliament. No one. You're on your own. You can just talk to your friends, you can talk to your neighbours, you can howl at the moon, but you can't do anything about it. You can vote for whoever you like, but in Ireland, you always end up with the same thing.